Noise!
I just fell over it, this ad in the paper, a little line ad in the Bristol Evening Post that said, "Woodwork for women." I don't remember what I made, I just remember that I got completely hooked. I was completely hooked. And I decided that I was going to get trained as a carpenter joiner, and when I looked into it more thoroughly, in those days, in the 80s in the UK, training was a thing. And I was able to get on a fantastic training course, which was really intensive, from 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, 5 days a week for many, many months. I never missed a day. I just thought it was the most wonderful thing, but one of the hardest things I've ever done. I had a go at being on a building site, and that was interesting, but I fell into a teaching job in Bath, teaching women woodwork and getting them back into the workforce. And that was the beginning of my love of actual teaching. It wasn't so much the woodwork anymore, but it was watching women transform from a stay-at-home mum, say, to building a beautiful piece of furniture that they were incredibly proud of. We came to Mullumbimby, sleepy country town, so I put a tiny little ad in the paper, "Woodwork for women," and people responded, and they came along and we made a cabinet together. And again, I just had a wonderful feeling that this is what I wanted to do, and Woodwork for Women was born in my backyard, really.
When I came to woodwork, I guess the expectations that I had were to find out things I didn't know. I was incredibly frustrated that if something went wrong at home, I couldn't fix it. I had no idea I was actually going to learn to build and construct. Intellectually I knew that, but at the time I thought I was just going to learn new skills.
It's one of the reasons I was interested in woodwork for women. You know, I'd worked in gender studies and I'd studied the barriers, and although we think now a lot of that's come down for women and we have, you know, equal rights and equal pay, but it's interesting to see women come back in their 30s and back to do advanced studies, and with another kind of perspective on it, saying, I ended up doing more of the housework, and I'm bitter about the way my choices were gendered and preset for me, and I'm still interested in the way, even though I felt free, there were all kinds of limitations that I adopted, and I don't even know how.
There are a lot of women out there who haven't had any opportunity whatsoever to learn woodwork or to pick up tools or to, you know, to even screw something together with a screwdriver. And I think that makes a difference to them, that they feel they can't do that, they need to call somebody. So there is something there that we might believe that we're not capable.
The first stage of the cabinet, which is the doors, I did when I was pregnant with Nikita, and that was different because it was quite a challenge, that cabinet, in the size of it. And the way I work at Woodwork is I usually work on the floor, and so I had this cabinet on the floor, and quite often I'd be inside the cabinet, outside the cabinet, all over the cabinet with this big tummy. And I continued to make this cabinet until she was born.
Mom? Yeah? Could you help me?
Yeah, I'm coming.
I can't get this to go back like that. Am I doing it?
So cute, isn't it? Yeah, you kind of got to put a little bit of pressure on that bit.
I've seen it happen for a lot of women who've done this kind of course, that it actually really helps them to connect to the full range of who they can be.
I think the energy that comes off women when they're working with wood is one of peace, of focus, and of power. They look like they're in charge and completely absorbed in what they're doing.
And there's something about the way in which women are withdrawn from powerful and practical tasks that really closes down their sense of competence, while all the while they're raising kids or working jobs or doing the most amazing things, but they narrow their sense of what that means. And there's something about taking up with something utterly different from what I thought I could do that opens up that, I don't know, I guess what they call in academic speak transferable skills, and that way in which you become aware, you know, physically first and then emotionally and then intellectually at the kinds of limits you've put on yourself, at the way that you can break those limits and at the way that you can grow.
Good. Yeah, that is. It's only like
7
6 or so.
Yeah.
So you could have gone more? Did you?
Yeah.
Tea time!
Oh,
Cup of tea!
Oh, right. Yeah, hungry. Excellent. Hello, Helen. Come for morning tea. Hello.
Hey, Barbara.
Woodwork wouldn't be the same without you, Helen. It wouldn't.
Yeah, they had to cope with that me for a whole term.
We did. It was very quiet.
Was it really?
I found fun. I laughed a lot. I cried an unbelievable amount when I was building a coffee table. I hit an incredible wall because I had these 2 beautiful pieces of wood that had been sitting under my house for about 12 years, and I found out they were rosewood, so I glued them together, and they were completely different widths. And I had 2 pieces, so I had 4 pieces. And I took them down to the machinery shop and asked them to just put them through the, whatever it's called. The thicknesser, thank you, little offside. But they both came back really, really thin. And it devastated me because one was supposed to be the tabletop about that thick and the other one was supposed to be a little tiny shelf and really thin. And I had these 2 really thin. So I still made a coffee table. It ended up being incredibly delicate and fine and beautiful with a drawer, and you know, it was just gorgeous. But yes, I cried and I cried. I think I spent the whole day crying that day. Yeah.
I also started to learn counselling, and which was a complete accident as well. But I realised that I could use it in my teaching to bring out the very best in the women's creativity. And the more that I used it and the more that I saw how well it worked, the more passionate I became about how one should be taught. And the way I was taught when I learnt woodwork was very, very basic, very sink or swim. And I didn't want anybody else to experience that, learning this wonderful skill. So I put a lot of energy into reading the person's body language, asking them how it felt for them learning woodwork, and when they got frustrated, and I encouraged them to have frustration and stamp their feet and scream if they wanted to, because that was all part of the learning process, and found that it worked, and the person was able to clear their head and go back to the woodwork and enjoy themselves instead of having a low level of frustration right through the project.
It was a real insight into how Pat doesn't just teach but gently sort of moves you along into the process. So the whole time when I was crying and embarrassed, she just stood there talking me through it and about how difficult it is when things don't work out the way you think. And she wasn't talking about wood at all, but it was all, you know, she was saying she was.
So you've got a gap either from shrinkage of the timber over the time, or maybe someone's lifted it by the edge of the table, and because the table's so heavy, it may have loosened this joint and it's worked its way apart. So what you can do is take the whole tabletop off,
Mm.
rip it down the centre here, and re-glue it, and then refinish it. Women get told when they're very young that they can't do things, or particularly with tools, people get very afraid, and they say, don't touch that or it'll cut your arm off, and stay away, get out of my shed, and no, you can't help me, and you're a girl, or whatever. All those things can happen to a person, particularly a woman when she's growing up, so that she might think that she's not going to be safe with the tool, or she's not going to be able to do the process. And I did have one woman who was very fearful of the saw, and she had been told growing up that saws were very dangerous, and she started to cry when I took her through the motions and described what the saw was going to do. The saw was off, but she started to cry, and I moved in closer to her and we talked about that so that she could get a little relief. And then she went through the motions of sawing something herself without turning on the machine. And again, she had a little cry. And then I asked her, is she ready to actually turn it on? And she said yes. And she turned on the machine, and she cut a piece of wood, and she stood back, and she looked totally different. She looked a little taken aback that it wasn't what she thought it was going to be. I've also taught men in the past, and I teach them in exactly the same way as I teach the women, by listening carefully. And I didn't notice that they were any more adept at picking up the tools, or that they were more confident than any of the women that had been through.
My favourite part of woodwork is, I think, the glue up, the challenge of testing it and then putting it together. And there's some magic that happens. You put it all together in a test dry run and it's fine, and then you put the glue on it and it all goes square. Well, it goes anything but square, in fact. And then you spend your whole time trying to get it to go back the way your dry run went, and it's finally square and it stands, and it has this beautiful way of becoming more than the sum of its parts.
I'm very particular, and I would stand there and sand until it was perfect, and measure everything, and spend a whole day drawing up the plan of what I was going to do. So for me to not be in control of something you think you're going to be, you think you're going to be completely in control. It's just a piece of wood, it's just a machine, it's just a saw, it's just a chisel, but you just don't have control. It's amazing. Yeah.
I really hate about woodwork the millimetre short days, the days when just nothing goes right and the project changes. Design innovation, I like to think of it as. And that's really taught me such a lot about myself, about both my ability in woodwork to focus my perfectionism and my demands, but also my ability to have to let go of some of that and let the wood be a living substance. It has its own energy, its own intention, its own limits, and so you have to just let it be in some ways. So I've had to both enjoy my love of precision and let it go. And I think Pat's really taught me that move from perfection to excellence, and the self-compassion in that I've really liked.
Here it's hard.
Oh, it's not going to come out now. It's not going to come out now.
And I've been doing it for the last 10 years and have been rewarded by at least 300 women coming through this workshop and having their lives transformed by learning this simple skill.
That's a perfect word.
Da